All right, welcome to another deep dive. We've got some great source material from you guys this time, and we are ready to plunge in.
Yeah, we're going to extract all those really interesting and hopefully useful insights.
Exactly, and today's deep dive is into The Practicing Mind by Thomas M. Sterner.
Right, so you guys wanted to know more about this book, and we're going to try and pull out like the really crucial ideas, the stuff that can help you, the listener, to cut through distractions. Really sidestep that whole overwhelmed feeling and achieve mastery. Like actually get a grip on how to achieve mastery in whatever area you're focused on.
Yeah.
So think of this as like a shortcut to understanding the key wisdom of the practicing mind.
Right.
Without necessarily getting bogged down in all the dense theory.
Yeah, I mean, who has time for that? We want actionable insights, right? Things you can actually put into practice.
Exactly.
So one of the first things that Sterner talks about, and it really kind of resonated with me, is this idea that our modern world is almost like it's set up to make us impatient. There's this constant emphasis on results, on instant gratification. It's all about the finish line, right? It's like the journey doesn't even matter anymore.
Well, and that's exactly what he's saying, right? Like the joy of the journey kind of gets lost when we're so focused on the destination.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is that Sterner argues that this intense focus on outcomes can actually backfire.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, it breeds impatience. You're right about that.
Yeah.
But it also, creates frustration, stress, even anxiety. Like you're always looking ahead and never fully content with where you are right now.
Right, yeah.
It's almost like life becomes this constant not yet,
It's like we're on this perpetual hamster wheel.
Exactly.
Like we always need to achieve the next thing to finally feel satisfied. But it sounds like Sterner's pointing to a different way of approaching, life, really.
I think you're right. If we kind of zoom out a bit, He's really advocating for embracing the process of growth. He suggests that a more fulfilling life isn't about constantly chasing the next big achievement, but about like being fully present in the steps that we're taking, like right now. And finding a real joy in the work itself.
Yeah, and he makes this really interesting point about, how obsessed we've become with speed and efficiency. Like everything has to be faster, more streamlined, right? Like we've lost this appreciation for the actual act of learning, for the little discoveries and nuances you find along the way.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really important point there for our listeners to consider. What might you be sacrificing when you constantly prioritize speed over thoroughness?
Oh, that's good.
Or, the immediate result over that deeper understanding that comes with, time and attention.
Right.
Sterner suggests we actually risk missing out on the inherent satisfaction of the process itself. By always having our eyes on the prize, we might be completely overlooking what's happening in the present moment.
That is so true. It's like you're always thinking 5 steps ahead instead of just being where you are.
Exactly.
So what I'm hearing is the potential benefit for you listening is that by consciously shifting your attention to the present moment, to the actual work you're engaged in, you might discover a greater sense of enjoyment and satisfaction, regardless of the outcome, the ultimate outcome. It's about, just being fully where you are, present.
That's such an insightful way to put it. I really like that.
Thanks.
And it leads us perfectly to, the heart of Sterner's idea, this concept of the practicing mind. So how would you describe that state of being?
Well, the way Sterner describes it, it's about being completely engaged in the present moment while you're working towards mastery. It's about bringing your full attention to whatever task is right in front of you.
And what's really interesting here is that subtle but incredibly powerful shift in focus.
Right.
You're moving away from that distant end goal.
Yeah.
And you're settling on the process itself. And by making that shift, Sterner contends that you naturally reduce that self-imposed pressure, the time we were talking about earlier.
Right. It's almost like taking a huge weight off your shoulders.
Well, exactly.
Exactly.
When you're not constantly judging your progress against some future ideal, you're just free to work, Just be in the moment. And Sterner makes it clear those significant achievements, those, impressive skills, they don't just magically appear.
Right.
They're built.
They're not just poof, out of thin air.
No.
If we think about it, it's those small incremental steps that we often don't even notice.
Right.
It's the consistent effort, the tiny improvements made along the way that eventually lead to mastery.
And that's such a crucial thing to remember, I think, especially when you're facing a really challenging task.
Right.
Thinking about the entire journey can just feel so overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
But Sterner's suggesting that if you just concentrate on that very next small step,
it becomes much more manageable.
yeah, you prevent that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Right.
You start to see tangible progress, even if it's small, and that builds patience, and it strengthens your confidence.
Right. Each step, even a tiny one, becomes a victory.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so this leads us into Sterner's practical advice, which he calls the 4 S's.
Yes, yes.
And these are like guidelines, real practical guidelines to help us cultivate this practicing mind that he's talking about in our everyday lives.
Yeah, and the 4 S's are simplify, small, short, and slow. And let's delve into each of these for our listeners and think about how they can start to implement these.
Okay, so the first S is simplify. What does that mean? Like, what's the advice here for someone listening?
Okay, so simplify in this context means, really making an effort to remove those unnecessary distractions from your environment and even your mind.
Okay.
It's about creating a space, both internal and external, where you can really concentrate on what's essential for the task at hand. And this might involve, turning off notifications on your devices, declaring your physical workspace, or even, consciously trying to filter out distracting thoughts. Really try to quiet the mind.
It's like clearing the path so that you can really focus.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And the next S is small.
Right. So small emphasizes the benefit of breaking down, those larger tasks into much smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
We touched on this earlier, but Sterner really underscores its importance in avoiding that feeling of being overwhelmed. When you're faced with, say, a big project, instead of focusing on the entirety of it, identify that absolute first, smallest action you can take. What's the very next thing you can do?
It's like building a complex structure out of individual Legos, right?
Yeah, I like that.
You put one piece down at a time.
Perfect analogy.
All right, and then we have short.
Okay, so short suggests, focusing your work or your practice sessions into shorter, more concentrated time periods.
Okay.
Instead of, committing to hours of effort all at once, Sterner recommends breaking it down into these focused bursts.
Okay.
This can help maintain your concentration and, prevent burnout. You might work intensely for, say, 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break before returning to it. It's about quality, not quantity.
Yeah, and that's actually in line with a lot of the, productivity advice and research out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally we have slow. Now this one, I think in our fast-paced world might seem a little counterintuitive.
Well, it can seem that way.
Yeah.
But slow here doesn't mean being inefficient. What it really means is working deliberately and mindfully.
Right.
It's about, paying close attention to the details, truly understanding the nuances of what you're doing, and allowing yourself the time to really grasp it. This, in turn leads to better control and a deeper level of understanding. So it's prioritizing quality and comprehension over sheer speed.
Okay, so just to recap quickly, so we have simplify, eliminate those distractions, small, break those tasks down, short, work in those focused bursts, and slow, be deliberate, be mindful.
Yeah, it's really a great set of practical guidelines.
Really practical.
And Sterner argues that by consistently applying these, you start to build momentum without feeling overwhelmed or crushed by your goals.
Right.
And you actually begin to appreciate each stage of the learning process.
Yeah, it's like instead of every step being this obstacle you have to overcome, it becomes an integral part of the journey.
Exactly.
Okay, now we've touched on this idea, but let's dive a little deeper into what Sterner calls process-oriented thinking.
Right.
Because he comes back to this again and again, our societal fixation on outcomes.
Yes. It's such a deeply ingrained habit for so many of us.
It is, yeah.
We're constantly asking, what will I achieve? What will be the final result?
Right, that end goal.
Yeah, but Sterner essentially flips this question on its head.
He argues that true mastery, the kind that endures and brings genuine satisfaction, comes from immersing yourself in the process itself, not just fixating on that endpoint.
So it's a real, a fundamental shift in mindset, isn't it? It's moving away from solely valuing the performance or the product and instead appreciating the work itself, the process.
Exactly.
And if we take a step back, this shift from a performance-based mindset to a process-based one has some really significant advantages.
I think so.
I mean, what do you see as the main benefits there?
Well, Sterner suggests that, it leads to greater enjoyment in what you're doing because your focus is on
the intrinsic rewards of the activity, not just some future payoff.
Okay.
And it also naturally reduces anxiety, I think, because you're not constantly measuring yourself against that future uncertain result.
Right. You're not worried about whether you're going to hit that target.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I can also see how that would nurture those really valuable qualities like, discipline, patience, and consistency. Because if you're actually enjoying the process and you're seeing those small steps of progress, you're much more likely to stick with it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the discipline develops from your consistent engagement with the process. Patience grows as you learn to appreciate the incremental nature of progress.
Right.
And consistency just arises from that positive feedback loop of engagement and small wins.
It all kind of feeds back into itself.
Exactly.
And so ultimately, Stirner's arguing that this process-oriented approach is what actually leads to higher levels of mastery and a much deeper sense of fulfillment.
In the long run, absolutely.
Yeah, in the long run.
Okay.
Now, let's talk about something that's a part of any learning journey, and that's making mistakes.
Right.
Which a lot of us, really find challenging.
It can be, yeah.
But Stirner offers a, I think, really interesting and helpful perspective on this.
He does. He really challenges that common negative view of mistakes and setbacks. Instead of seeing them as failures, he presents them as crucial feedback.
Okay.
They provide information that can help you adjust your approach, refine your skills, and ultimately improve.
So it's about changing the way we think about mistakes, right?
Exactly.
Instead of, oh, I messed up, I'm terrible at this, it's, okay, I learned something here.
Right. It's, okay, that didn't work as I expected. What can I learn from it?
Yeah, exactly. It's much more constructive.
Absolutely. And Stirner encourages listeners to cultivate that non-judgmental attitude toward their mistakes. And this is crucial for maintaining motivation.
Yeah.
If you're constantly criticizing yourself every time you stumble,
right,
you're much more likely to just, get discouraged and give up.
Give up, yeah.
So the focus shifts from that harsh inner critic to simply observing what happened and how you might approach it differently next time.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So it's about continuous improvement.
All right, right.
It's that ongoing cycle of trying, making mistakes, learning, adjusting.
Exactly. And Stirner even suggests that those who ultimately achieve the most significant things are often the ones who have learned to view failure not as a final judgment, but as an opportunity for growth and learning.
That's powerful. It's like failure becomes your teacher, right?
Yeah, I really like that.
Okay, now another key element Stirner talks about is developing patience and what he calls inner stillness.
Right.
Now, in our constantly buzzing world, this can feel like a real uphill battle.
It can. It definitely can.
And so how does Stirner explain this? Where does impatience come from?
Well, he explains that impatience often stems from a fundamental disconnect.
Okay.
This yearning to be somewhere other than the present moment. You're always looking ahead, wishing you were further along in your progress. And this prevents you from fully engaging with enjoying what you're doing right now.
Right. So you're never really satisfied.
Yeah, and it leads to a sense of frustration.
Yeah, it's like your mind is always a step ahead and you're never fully present.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do we actually cultivate this inner stillness?
Well, he defines it as essentially being at peace with the present. Accepting where you are, what you're doing right now.
Okay.
And he suggests practical techniques like focused breathing exercises.
Yeah, okay.
Just paying attention to your breath.
Right.
Or general mindfulness practices, which are really about, bringing your attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay.
And these kinds of practices can help strengthen your ability to stay present, grounded.
It's not about, achieving some kind of Zen state. Right?
Not at all.
It's about developing these little habits that gently bring you back to the present.
Exactly.
Yeah, and Stirner argues that this patient mindset not only enhances your skills in whatever you're pursuing,
right,
but it also improves your overall well-being, how you feel.
Absolutely. I mean, when you're not constantly fighting against the present moment,
right,
you naturally experience less stress and more contentment in your daily life.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. Now, let's talk about something we all encounter at some point. Resistance. That inner voice that says, you can't do it, or it's too hard.
That inner critic.
Yeah, and Stirner identifies these mental barriers as a real obstacle to developing this practicing mind.
He does, and he highlights how negative self-talk, those persistent doubts and those underlying fears
can really undermine our progress. They create this internal resistance that makes it difficult to stay focused and committed to the process.
Yeah.
Even when we, intellectually know it's what we want to do.
We know we should be doing it, but we get in our own way.
Exactly.
So the first step, I guess, is becoming aware of these barriers, right? Noticing that inner critic when it starts to pipe up.
Yeah, you got it. So Stirner encourages you, the listener, to become aware of those mental roadblocks. Once you can identify them, the self-doubt, the fear of failure, you can start to consciously challenge them and replace them with more, positive, process-oriented thoughts.
Okay, so instead of thinking, I'll never be able to do this, it's, okay, let me just focus on this one small part.
Exactly.
And that's where those mindfulness techniques come in, right?
Yes.
To help us observe these thoughts without being swept away by them.
Exactly. Regularly practicing mindfulness, it helps you recognize these thoughts as just thoughts, not truths.
Right.
Not insurmountable obstacles.
Yeah, just thoughts. You can let them go.
And actively reframing your perspective, choosing to focus on the process and the small steps forward is key to breaking through that resistance, and maintaining steady progress.
Okay.
And Stirner also makes this point that feeling discomfort and, encountering struggles is normal. It's expected.
Right.
It's part of the process,
Yeah, it's not always going to be easy.
Exactly, and that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Now, finally, Stirner talks about the crucial role of discipline and habit formation in all of this.
Right, because this practicing mind, it isn't something you just, decide to have one day and poof, it magically sticks.
Right. You can't just flip a switch.
No, it requires consistent effort.
Right.
And it needs to be, woven into your daily life. Stirner explains that our habits, they largely shape our actions.
Yeah.
So by consciously developing positive routines, you create an environment that supports consistent growth and engagement with this practicing mind.
So it's about putting those structures in place, creating those routines that make it easier to engage in the process.
Exactly, to consistently apply those 4 S's we discussed.
Right, exactly. And Stirner is careful to point out that discipline isn't about, forcing yourself to do something you hate.
Right, it shouldn't be miserable.
Yeah.
It's not about willpower.
Yeah.
It's more about cultivating a mindset, that naturally leans towards consistent effort. When discipline becomes integrated into your routines, that progress starts to feel much more natural.
Yeah, it's not this uphill battle anymore.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so let's bring this all together.
Okay.
We've taken a really thorough look at Stirner's The Practicing Mind.
We have.
We started by examining the problem that he sees with our modern obsession with results and how that can lead to, stress and dissatisfaction. We explored the core concept of the practicing mind, that state of being fully engaged in the present process.
In the process, yeah.
And then we broke down the practical application of his ideas through the 4 S's: simplify, small, short, slow, offering ways to actually start cultivating this mindset.
Right, some concrete practical tips.
Yeah, we talked about the power of shifting from an outcome-focused approach to a process-focused approach, reframing mistakes as valuable learning opportunities, and the importance of developing patience and inner stillness.
Right, those are crucial.
And then, of course, we tackled the challenges like overcoming internal resistance and those mental barriers.
Yeah, the inner critic.
And how discipline and habits play a role in all this.
Right, how to make it stick.
Yeah, make it a sustainable way of life, really.
Exactly, a way of being.
So the core message for you listening is this. By shifting your focus away from that finish line and bringing it to the present moment, to the process of learning and growing, you can unlock a more fulfilling experience. You can reduce stress and ultimately achieve mastery in whatever you set your mind to.
More effectively and sustainably, I think that's the key.
Yeah, and here's a final thought for you to chew on. Think about just one area in your life where you might be overly fixated on the outcome. How might applying just one of Stirner's principles, maybe breaking the task down into something smaller or approaching it a bit more slowly and mindfully,
Right.
how might that change your experience and your progress?
Good question.
We encourage you to really try it out, experiment over the next few days, and see what happens.
Yeah, see what you discover.
All right, thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.